This is an utter travesty. I sound really angry. 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 Saying so much so Jeff Blasher 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 so much so forth. You know, the only good thing I would say about this is that LA's ahead of them, and LA has a lot of good forwards already in their system. Some young players. Maybe they're going to want to go a young defenseman to go with Drew Doughty, somebody to play with him, somebody that he can kind of mentor along the way. So that could mean that one of the high end forwards, Byfield or Stützle, may drop to Detroit at number 4. If not, then this pick becomes really, really interesting. Does Steve go with Jaime Drysdale? You know, Jake Sanderson has been moving up, a defenseman, or there's a lot of good quality, high scoring forwards still left at the number 4. Or does Steve go really off the board and go for Askarov, the goalie? So I'm going to see if these work. But all right, hopefully I can't hear myself. All right, great. I mean, I think it really. I think the NHL has to look at this draft system because if a team look, I'm going to read off one of these 16 teams. They're going to have that qualifying round, and they're going to have 8 teams in the East and 8 teams in the West go at it. The 4 that are eliminated in each conference, one of those 8 teams is going to get the number 1 pick. We don't know who. They got to do the phase 2. That means Pittsburgh, Montreal, Carolina, the Rangers, the Islanders, the Panthers, Toronto. God, let it not be Toronto. Columbus, Edmonton, not Edmonton either. I love you, Ken Holland. Congratulations on getting in the Hall of Fame. But man, how many number 1 picks do you guys need? Chicago, you shouldn't get it either. Nashville, the Coyotes, Vancouver, Minnesota, Calgary, Winnipeg. One of those teams won the draft lottery. That tells me the system is flawed and it's not good. And I'm not saying this because I'm a lifelong Detroiter. I'm a Red Wing fan. And every time they've qualified for the draft lottery, they've always gone down. This time, 3 spots. They've gone down 3 spots. Most of the time, it's just 2. But, or 1. They've gone down 1. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know that this is there's a lot more important things going on in the world right now. I understand that. I get that. But for this little brief moment in time, it's time for the NHL to take a look at this lottery system and do something about it, because this is an utter farce. It truly is. How can you? Oh, guess what? We did this big show. We killed 15 minutes of time. We talked to Alexis Lafreniere, and hey, there's Gary Bettman. And guess what? We don't know where he's going. There's 1 of 16 teams now has a chance to get him, but guess what? It's not the teams that had the best odds to get him. Detroit and Ottawa combined had like a 43% thing to get, to get him. Look, if I'm Ottawa, I get 3 and 5. The Red Wings get 4. I'm kind of shaking my head too. Ottawa's got to be feeling the sting right now. LA, Lucky Luke Robitaille, we like him. I mean, Ken remembers one time at Inside Hockey Town, Lucky Luke was amazed at the number of shrimp cocktail Ken and I could eat. So we love Luke. Remember that? He was like amazed. So I'm happy for Luke. Rob Blake's a good guy. I've always kind of liked the Kings. And I think that the good thing about this is that maybe LA will go defense. I mean, the top 3 forwards are too good. Maybe they're just going to go that. But if they don't, that means quite possibly that Stützle or Byfield could go to the Red Wings at 4. If not, then gosh only knows what Steve's going to do. I mean, when we hear from him at 9:00 or whenever it is tonight, he's going to be gracious and all that kind of stuff. He'll toe the party line, but he's got to be PO'd. He has to be. I mean, this is an utter joke.
Yeah, I understand. Ken, what do you think? What is your take? Oh, that's so sad.
You know what? First of all, I know I put on a little weight during this pandemic. Hopefully, I don't look quite like that bad. But with that said, I got a red shirt on. I've got red shorts. I've got red underwear on. I mean, maybe I overdid it in red, but man, I can't believe it. It's. I do have to say, I love that head of hair though. Got the cat. Oh man. Kudos to whoever did that. Actually, I want a copy of that.
I'm sure we could get you that.
But man,
what are your thoughts?
I'll shut up.
All right, only for a minute. I know it's only for a minute, so I'll get Ken while I can. Ken, what are you thinking about Art telling it like it is from Austin? I love it. What's going through your head when they revealed that the Red Wings are 4th pick?
Well, first of all, I'm a little bit disappointed. And the reason why I'm disappointed is because the 7 teams that didn't make the playoffs, the reward for not making the playoffs is that you have the possibility to get a number 1 or a number 2 or number 3 pick. And it just seems to me that more teams were added to the playoff mix to conclude the 2019 campaign. And now one of those teams is not only going to make the playoffs and play a little more hockey before this 2019 campaign ends, and one of those teams, as Art mentioned, is going to have the number 1 pick in the NHL draft. To me, it almost seems to me like the Red Wings are punished for being the worst team in the league. And how this draft was originally started, and yes, it sounds like it's sour grapes, but it's to help the teams that are at the bottom of the pecking order to get better. And the problem is that now in a league of parity, there's going to be teams that are going to be on the bottom for a while, and they need to get going and get to the top, and the top teams will move to the bottom eventually. So it's a no-brainer that the teams that are not going to make the playoffs should have the opportunity to get the number 1 pick in the draft. Now, with that said, the Red Wings are still going to get a good player, a very good player, not the likes of a Lafreniere, because I think he's the overall consensus of the best player in the draft this year, but they're going to get a solid player, whether it's a forward, whether it's a defenseman. But still, I think our fans kind of feel jaded by what just happened. So that's just my opinion on it. It's too bad, but hey, that's the way it goes. And now you just got to pick 4th and hope you pick a really good, solid player that's going to be a very good Red Wing for years to come.
I guess sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. But it is unfortunate that the Red Wings dropped to 4th. Now let's talk about the Rangers. Tell me what can happen. Can they get the first draft pick, and can they win the Stanley Cup all at once?
Actually, in this qualifying round that they're about to play, where they're going to have they also have that round robin round to pick the top 4 seeds. They're not in it. So what's going to happen is one of these teams that loses in the qualifying round, there's going to be 8 teams. Now, I think what they're going to do is position them in like winning percentage. Let's say Pittsburgh loses, but they had the best winning percentage when the league paused on March 12th. So Pittsburgh, I would assume, would be Team H. So they have a 1% chance of winning that lottery. So they'll seed them all that way, So it'll be like Pittsburgh, Carolina, the Islanders, Toronto in winning percentage, and then they're going to draw these cards again. And they're going to draw 8 new cards, and all of them are going to be those teams. So they'll say, okay, with the 15th pick, it's Pittsburgh because they only have a 1% chance. And Team G is the Montreal Canadiens. But let's say Montreal isn't slotted for number 7 because they're only going to do 1 through 8. So that means chances are Montreal is going to get the number 1 pick. Whichever team doesn't fall into their slot, that's going to be the team that likely is going to be called at the end. And these teams, to give you this, Team A has a 6% chance of winning the draft lottery. Team H had a 1% chance, and then you have Team B at 5, and then it goes 3.53, 2.52, 1.5, and 1. One of these teams won the draft lottery with minuscule odds. We don't know who they are because it's going to come from a pool of 16. So if I'm sitting there, if I'm sitting there and I'm the Florida Panthers or somebody who probably don't have, I think they might have an outside chance of actually winning the Stanley Cup, but a team that really doesn't have a chance. If I might be secretly hoping, God, I hope we get eliminated in this qualifying round, and God, I got a shot at the number 1 pick, and then everybody else will be slotted that way. But the thing that's bad too is LA moves up 2 spots. LA was at number 4 and they're at number 2. But then every other team of these, as Kenny said, of those 7 teams, they all dropped. So I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is not the way a lottery should work. Maybe the first system, because it was, the Red Wings could fall no further than 2 if they were going to do what originally was proposed. That went over like a lead balloon, as they say. So that wasn't going to happen. But then to go back and then throw in, these, we're going to have a phase 2. And, once Bill Daly walked out and he said, I've got 8 cards here, I knew it. I said, well, the Red Wings are 4. They're 2. You knew that. That means one of the teams of these 8, team A through H, one of them is they're in the top 3. Well,
didn't think it was going to be the first pick, though.
Right, you're exactly right. Okay, yeah, but it's the NHL. It's a flawed system. This isn't this. If I'm Gary Bettman right now, I would be embarrassed. I would be embarrassed. This is not the way a draft's supposed to work.
You know what, Carly and Art, if you just one thing real quick here. If you added up the total percentages between the Red Wings and the Ottawa Senators, you would think one of those teams would get the number 1 pick in the draft, just based on the fact that the percentages were in their favor, right? Neither of them, they dropped the 3rd. Ottawa dropped the 3rd. Ottawa dropped the 5th too, and then the Red Wings got the 4th pick or something like that. So, Ottawa was 5th and 3rd, and the Red Wings finished 4th. So the teams that had the best chance of getting number 1 didn't even end up in the top 2, which is amazing.
I know. They didn't even end up in the top 3. Tonight the top 3 was going to be decided. The top 3, where this is the top 3, and so, guess what? Unfortunately, your worst teams aren't even in that mix. None of the Detroit and Ottawa are not in the top 3. So I mean, it's just it's stupid. It's just stupid is what it is. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I know I have to calm down. Actually, I kept saying they were going to be 4th overall, and they're going to get a good hockey player, and and whomever that is, I'm going to greet you with open arms the first time I see you, young man, when the Red Wings introduce you. It's not on you. I'm not criticizing the player that they're going to get, because it's going to be a good player, and I know Steve's going to do the best job. Steve's going to make it right. He's going to get. It's going to work out. Trust me, it's going to work out. But the system has to be revised. Detroit could go down. Detroit, the worst team in the league, unfortunately by far. Winning percentage not even 30%. I don't think. They could drop 3. That's the most they could drop. And guess what? They dropped 3. I mean, that's just stupid. It's just dumb.
But, mathematically, it doesn't really make sense. But I know the 2020 draft pool, the prospects are outstanding players. We got to look at the silver lining and know we have good players to pick from. It's not just Alexis Lafreniere. There are so many good players that will add to our team regardless. So, Art, got to look at the silver lining. Trying to be the positive one. Little angel on your shoulder right now.
No, don't get me. Hey, Carly, look, you're right. It's going to be a high-end quality player. There's no question. you're talking about a player in the top 4 in the NHL draft. So he's going to be a good quality young man. But I just think that he needs. I just think whether they got the first pick or not, it's not even that. I'll be honest with you. It's that somebody from the pool, from Team A through Team H, that we don't even know wins the draft. That's what I'm upset about. That tells me something's wrong. It's not a good system.
I get that completely. Ken, who are you gunning for? Because odds are we're not going to get Lafreniere. Who are you gunning for in that prospect pool for Steve Yzerman to call on for the 4th overall pick?
Well, you know what? If you base the picks on how the top 4 is going to go, obviously the number 4 pick would probably be a defenseman like Jaime Drysdale. And, he's a solid player. He was really good for Team Canada. He can move the puck. He can put points on the board. I'm not so sure he could break in right away, but down the road, he's going to be a terrific hockey player. And, he's got the numbers to back it up in his league. But, it all depends, as Art said, maybe the Los Angeles Kings, because they do have Kopitar and they do have some top-end forwards, that they might go with a Drysdale forward defenseman. And, that could happen too. So, a lot of things can happen now that, it might give Steve Yzerman some opportunities to think about who he really wants. Like, is Stutzel going to be available at 4 when the Red Wings are going to pick? I don't know. I know the Red Wings like him. I know they like Byfield, but I don't think Byfield's going to be there at number 4. If Drysdale goes 2, then Byfield probably goes 3, and now the Red Wings have to pick somebody at 4. So, there's a lot that could go on. And not only that, but Art, I don't know about this, but there could be a lot of wheeling and dealing too on draft day that no one's even talking about, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. That's a possibility too.
Well, I would love to see Steve pull off this kind of deal where he trades down. He has those number 2 picks, like 3 number 2 picks, I believe. I got to calm down because my mind is just racing here. But if he were to somehow to get two number 1 picks and take Askarov with 1 and then a high-end forward with the other, that would be great. But he would have to, trade down. He'd have to get rid of the number 4 pick, trade that, but not go down too far, and then trade some of the number 2s to go up in the draft to maybe sandwich it in where they're at like number 7 and number 14 or something. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up here. But that way, maybe you can get Askarov, who's, a goalie, best goalie since Carey Price by all accounts. And then maybe then after Askarov, he takes another high-end forward. Look, I mean, there's good guys. Lucas Raymond, Alexander Holtz, Cole Perfetti from Saginaw. I mean, you have, Marco Rossi. I mean, there's some really, really good players. And so I'm not saying they're not going to get a bad player. I'm just thinking that, maybe Steve gets creative at this point because the Red Wings need a lot of help. And, I think I'll be honest with you. I think Askarov at 4 is way too high. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he'll go for, especially, if you're going to watch this draft, regardless of whoever gets the top pick, they're going to go with Lafreniere. A good team's going to get a great player, a franchise player, a real difference maker. Okay, there he goes. Yeah, let's go. And then LA's going to be the key, depending on what LA does with their pick. Do they go defense because they have a lot of high-end young forwards, or will they take one of the, by all accounts, the top 3 players in the draft are Lafreniere, Byfield, and Stützle. If they take a defenseman, then either Stützle or Byfield is going to be a Red Wing. That's the way I look at it. LA's the key.
And it's funny, when we were texting, the 3 of us were in a group chat before we found out Red Wings are picking 4th. And Art, I believe it was you who said you thought La La Land was going to get the first pick.
Well, actually, that was a joke on the Academy Awards a few years ago, where they announced La La Land. It was, Bombadi and Clyde stars, Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty announced La La Land. And unfortunately, I can't remember who actually won. The guy from La La Land had to get up there, looked at the envelope. It didn't say La La Land, and then had to say, no, Ken
Right.
Cal, the Ken Cal story won the best picture that year. That's what I was just kind of joking.
Well,
So
you weren't far off. You were
no,
only
you know what? Really,
pick.
you're right. When I said La La Land, I figured because the Kings are in the mix, everyone would think that, but I was more making a reference to the Academy Awards a few years back. I was trying to be clever and funny, which I should never try to do.
All right, so we're going to take to some social media questions. So you guys send them in for Ken, Art, and I to answer. They've been popping up at the bottom over the past few minutes, but we clearly have been a little too heated to get to these questions. All right, so, look at this. We've got Joey saying in the 83 draft that Yzerman was the 4th pick, so 2020 could work out. I mean, a 4th pick, picking a 4th pick.
Well, that was an interesting draft because I thought everyone would take LaFontaine. I thought LaFontaine would go first, and then he kept slipping down. And if he was available at 4, I think the Red Wings would have taken LaFontaine, but he was taken ahead of Yzerman, so Yzerman dropped, and that's how the Red Wings got him. And he turned out to be a very good, solid hockey player and a Hall of Famer. So, you never know what can happen. That's the thing about the draft is sometimes guys have qualities now, and it never translates into the National Hockey League and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But I just think that when you look at guys like Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid, I think Lafreniere probably fits into that category. Maybe not as good, but he's going to be a solid player. So I just think that he's a can't-miss candidate. And I think if you talk to everybody in the National Hockey League, they'll tell you that too. So, no surprise. I think he's going to have a great career in hockey in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, okay, I agree. If this number 4 pick turns out to be Steve Yzerman, but at this point, I'd rather have Steve Yzerman come out of retirement at 55 and play for the Red Wings next season. I just think it's a flawed system. I'm not going to be able to get over that. I need a 24-hour cool-off period because it's not so much that the Red Wings didn't get the number 1 pick. It's team A through H. Imagine if you're Lafreniere. You're waiting your whole life. You're going to be the number 1 pick. You're being interviewed. You're on NHL Network and NBC Sports, and they're talking to you. And guess what? He knows he's going to go to one of 16 teams now instead of one of 7 or what he probably figured out. One of these 7 teams I'm going to go to. Now it's out in the open. I don't feel terrible for the guy, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty there too. So, it has worked out. They're going to get a good player. Nothing is a given, as we know. And so, and based on the way the Red Wings have always drafted, and they go after intelligence, guys that really want to work their butt off, have a high work ethic and a high hockey IQ, it's going to be a good player. Again, to whomever you are, and I know that, all the prospects watch the Word on Woodward, so we're not knocking you, or I'm not knocking you. I'm just knocking the process.
I think they understand, Art. And I think we have a question. Yeah, Askarov. Okay, what are your thoughts on Askarov? Ken, let's start with you.
Well, you know what? He is a top-notch goaltender, and I just think from what I hear is that the Minnesota Wild are looking for a goalkeeper, and there are several other teams that were looking for a goalkeeper too, like the Calgary Flames. But everything I've looked at, it seemed like if he drops down far enough, like the Minnesota Wild would be the team that would probably draft him if he was still available. But no doubt about it. He's a solid goalkeeper, and down the road, he's going to be a top goaltender in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, he's a great player. He's a great player. He was in the tournament that was unfortunately canceled because of COVID-19, which would have been at the Ice Cube in Ann Arbor and at the USA Hockey Arena in Plymouth. I guess the U18 tournament. He played in that last year, and it was a coming out party. He beat Team USA, which had 11 number 1 draft picks in last year, the 2019 draft. The guy's a stud. He's 6'3". Great glove hand. I think he's like Grant Fuhrer, if I remember correctly. He's left-handed, so he catches with his right hand. You don't see many goalies like that. So, I'm kind of a goaltending freak. I'd love to see Askarov. I just don't think Steve's going to pull the trigger that early at number 4.
Is that something you think would be beneficial for the team, though?
Well, if he turns out to be the next Carey Price or better, like they're all saying, then Steve again, he's going to walk on water for his next trick. I just think it's too high. The Red Wings need so much help, and I want to see what Ken says about this. I mean, they need goal scoring. If there's a premier goal scorer, a guy who has goal scoring potential, maybe a guy like guy I like is like Alexander Holtz. Who's Lucas Raymond's Swedish countryman. This guy's a pure sniper, but I'm telling you, if LA goes defense and Byfield then goes to Ottawa at 3, then Stützle's the guy at 4. And I think Byfield might be the guy at 4. I mean, again, I know I keep saying it, but LA is the key. If they go defense, then the Red Wings, this falling to number 4 isn't quite as bad. Because Stützle is a player. He could actually... They say that Lafreniere's ready. The second most guy that's ready to be in the NHL next season, from all accounts, is Tim Stützle, who played for Mannheim. Mo Seider's team has already played professional, has already played against men, has played center his whole career except last year in Mannheim where they moved him to the wing. So, I mean, Stützle, I guess now I've just got to be praying for Stützle or Byfield to fall. And, our good buddy Lucky Luke, Luke Robitaille and the Kings with Rob Lowe decide that and Drew Doughty. Hopefully Drew Doughty's on the phone right now saying, I need some help back there on the back end. I need a D. Give me a young D. I got to mentor somebody. Hopefully they listen to him, and boom, they draft at they draft a defenseman at 2, and then one of those good high end forwards fall to Detroit at 4.
Well, there's always surprises in the draft. And, like you mentioned, LA, and all that comes to mind is, Jonathan Quick actually went south a little bit. So, what if they went with Askarov as a goaltender? That would really, mix things up a little bit for the other teams that are drafting after Los Angeles. But I don't think they would do that. But, like you said, Art, there's a lot of good players out there. Stützle's good. Lucas Raymond, he's not a bad player either. And Cole Perfetti, as you mentioned, from Saginaw. So there's a lot of high end players there that the Red Wings could take. But I agree with you. The thing I like about Jaime Drysdale is the fact that in this league today, you need defensemen who can provide some offense from the back end. Right. So, and he's that type of player that can do it. And he comes out from the back end. And think about this, you always build through your goaltender and your defense. The forwards will score their goals. But if you have solid defensemen, you've got 4 solid defensemen. And looking in the ranks coming up for Detroit, you look at Roenick and what type of year he had. You've got McIsaac who's coming up, Mo Seider who's coming up. You've got Danny DeKeyser who's a bit of a veteran right now. All of a sudden, you've got some young guys that are stepping into the lineup, and they could be Red Wings for a long time back there on the blue line. And I think of guys like in Chicago. I think of back there on the blue line, and they had Hjalmarsson, and they had Keith, and they had Seabrook, and they all played together for a long period of time. Offense from their defense, they provided a lot of points. And the other thing, too, is when you have offense from the defense, it helps your forwards, too, and get points, especially on the power play. So, Drysdale, to me, if the Red Wings want to go with a defenseman and, have somebody team up there with Seider down the road, maybe that's the pick.
Well, I agree. I mean, Drysdale would be a good pick. I mean, he's considered to be the best puck mover, good on his own end, one of the smartest players in the draft. So, look, you can never have enough defensemen, even though he's right-handed. I mean, eventually, if all these young D pan out, and really a kind of a strength of the Red Wings prospect, we talk about the Tigers and pitching, look at the Red Wings young defensive core that they have coming up. I mean, these guys could really be players, every one of them. Gus Lindstrom we forgot about. He was pretty impressive. So if that happens, who's to say, and a lot of them are right-handed shots, that Steve doesn't package somebody and bring in somebody. Maybe Lafreniere is going to be upset with Vancouver or something and want out. Maybe Steve packages and Drysdale and Lafreniere is finally here. Yeah, or Toronto is too much in Toronto. I just thought, he's, that would be great. That would be great if he pulls a Lindros and refuses to put on the Toronto jersey at the draft when they call his name. Going back to what Lindros did years ago with the Quebec jersey. But anyway, I'm just saying, overall, Drysdale, would be a great pick. I have no problem if they go Jaime Drysdale. I just got a feeling that Drew Doughty's lobbying the Kings right now to take that guy. I hope he is, at least.
Okay, so what I want to know, I know we don't know who we're getting in any sense of the thought, but is this player that we draft going to be a player that plays for the Red Wings, or do you think they'll start in the AHL, depending on where they're at currently? Do you think this is a player that will be right up in the Red Wings team wearing that windwheel on his sweater?
Well, I'll talk first. And, as much as I've seen, and Art, you and I saw Mo Sider play in the tournament up there in Traverse City, and he actually looked pretty good. And he had been a year in Hockey League. So what that tells me is that if they do select a Drysdale, he's probably going to get some experience in the American Hockey League.
All right. I think we're going to go to Steve.
Sorry to cut you off, but we have Steve Yzerman, so we will be back in a moment. Right now, we are going to take you to a live look-in to the Steve Yzerman press conference happening now, courtesy of Labatt Blue Light.
And finally, please remember to mute your microphone. You're not asking a question. And with that, we will go ahead and get started with Brad Galley from Channel 7.
Steve, I know you got to stay positive and say the right things, but how frustrated are you with how tonight went?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not surprised. Again, we had a 18.5% chance of winning the first pick. So realistically, I'm prepared to be sitting here today, not talking about the first pick. So I'm not really surprised. The odds were in favor. The bottom 8 or the 8 playoff teams had a 24.5% chance of combined of getting the pick. So the odds were better that the first pick went to the bottom 8 than it did to us.
I guess then my follow-up would be, I know you weren't a huge – you said you had just learned about the format the last time we talked with you. I don't know how openly you want to say you disagree with are you at least frustrated or disappointed with how the NHL ultimately settled this lottery format?
They got to do what they got to do. Whether anything I say is going to be self-serving, Brad. So they got to do what they got to do, and you can get an opportunity maybe to talk to the NHL, and you can ask them those questions.
All right, thank you, Steve.
The next question will be Helene St. James from the Detroit Free Press.
Hey, Steve, just without the combine and such, how well do you feel some of the players available to you? I mean, have you been able to, kind of get to know them? Will you assume calls, or how good of a handle do you feel you have on some of the players that will be available to you at fourth?
Well, first of all, I'll say, whether we're picking first or fourth, we feel we're going to get a very good prospect. So knowing we're at the fourth pick, there's going to be great options for us, and we're going to be very excited about the prospect that we get, and he'll have tremendous potential to be a good NHL player. So to answer your question, we are throughout the year, our scouts obviously are watching the players. They spend time with the players themselves, getting to know them. Since the seasons have ended or been canceled or paused, we've spent a lot of time interviewing players, as most teams, I'm sure all teams have, interviewing them, over the internet, and we'll continue to do our homework. And there's still work to be done. We're not exactly sure how the rest of the summer and eventually leading up to the draft will play out, but we'll know these kids as well as we possibly can. It would be really nice to, just that little bit of information we get at the combine, the test results, I find interesting. So every team but one actually doesn't have any testing results. So we'll get by without that.
There are a lot of good players, available in this draft, even outside of first, second, or third. Are you fairly confident you're going to get a player who can maybe move the needle on the rebuild? I mean, whether you choose somebody who can help you offensively, or I know Drysdale is a top defenseman who might be available at fourth. that you'll get a player who can move the needle on the rebuild?
Well, I think we're going to get a great prospect, and hopefully that prospect turns into a player that can move the needle.
Thank you.
Next question will be Bob Winowski from the Detroit News.
Hey there, Steve. When you've talked about the rebuild, you've talked about you have to draft well, develop, and everything. And you've also mentioned, and you got to get a little bit of luck too at some point. Just being candidly, does this count as the complete opposite of a little bit of luck in the lottery today?
Wojo, maybe it seems that way today, but ultimately, let's see in a few years when see how this the draft shakes out and who becomes a good player. Well, again, we're going to get a great prospect, and how good of a player he becomes, time will tell. So we can sit here today and feel sorry for ourselves if we want. It doesn't matter. That's the system is what it is, and it's the same for all the teams. And we're going to get a great prospect. We're going to do everything we can to develop them, and you know what? Maybe we will get lucky again. Colorado, I think, lost the lottery a couple of years ago and ended up at the 4th spot and got Cale Makar, who is a player that definitely moves the needle. So time will tell. But like I said, we're excited about the prospect we'll get, and we'll get our lucky breaks along the way, and maybe this will be one of them in an odd-looking way.
How many times in the next few months do you think you'll hear that you were the number 4 pick in a draft a few years ago? And I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
It's a long time ago. It doesn't resonate with me anymore. Again, I was picked 4th overall. I had no idea going into the draft what my NHL career was going to be like. I had no expectations for myself, and things worked out. So, whether you're picking 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or picking 1st gives you the best odds maybe to get a player. But at the end of the day, you look at the history of the draft, and you're going to see at the end of the day, great players come from all different spots in the draft. Just the higher you pick, the more you increase your odds.
The next question is from Max Boltman with The Athletic.
Hi, Steve. I'm just curious, with the potential for some of the European leagues to start in September, what kind of situation would that create? How could that impact the draft if you're able to get kind of the start of a new season looks on some of these guys in Europe?
Yeah, Max, that could just confuse the situation even more. We thought about that. You might have some of these top kids, in all likelihood, you'll have some of these top kids playing the way it looks right now, and potentially some of the North American kids not playing. So, depending on who's playing, who's not playing, who plays well, who doesn't, it can just complicate your decision-making process even more.
Are there any kind of new perspectives that the long delay has allowed you to bring in more to the scouting process, whether that's the player development guys, or you just kind of keep it as is?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Like, would you have Sean and Dan do any more work on these guys than they might do in a normal draft, just since there's so much time in this one?
They're involved. They're out there watching our prospects, but along the way, you see a lot of the kids for the draft as well. This will be my 2nd draft back with the organization, and with Sean and Dan, to what extent they were involved last year. On some of the players they saw, they could weigh in, but ultimately, we've got amateur scouting staff that it is their job to watch these kids, to know these kids, and they'll be, things haven't changed in that regard. It's the amateur staff that will dictate how our draft goes.
And then last thing for me, do you have an idea at this stage how big a group of players you expect to kind of be deciding between at that spot at 4?
There are several good options. There's several good options. I don't want to give you a specific number, but there's a lot of different ways we could go depending on what happens before us.
Thanks.
Yep.
Our next question is from Art Regner with DetroitRedWings.com.
Hi, Steve. I've got a few questions, actually, but first of all, I'm just kind of curious. because of everything and all the time that we've had on our hands, is your list of these players, all your scouting reports, is it essentially done at this point? There really isn't much to do except go to the draft and see how it plays out.
Well, as Max pointed out, like these kids may play more hockey in September, maybe late August. The European League start earlier, August, September. If they're playing, we're probably going to go watch them, and it will have some influence on our decisions, good or bad. So no, I think there's work to be done. Now that we know where we're picking, well, obviously we can really focus on the kids in that spot. And I know our guys, myself, we've watched a lot of video on them. We're going to go back now and we'll watch even more. That's all we can do right now. Kris Draper and the staff have interviewed a lot of the kids in this type of format, and have spent a lot of time with them and a lot of time with the people around them, getting to know them from different perspectives. So there's still work to be done. And like I said, I think if there's more hockey to be played, which it looks like there will be prior to the draft, we will watch it.
And I know that you were part of this committee for the AHL to see, I guess you're going to give them several options about maybe how to restart the season. Have you had any opportunity to already meet? Do you have any kind of timeline?
We haven't, other than the announcement, the invitation to be a part of it, and the announcement of the committee. We haven't begun yet, haven't met, haven't talked, nothing has started yet.
You said an invitation. Are you going to accept that invitation?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Welcome, Art.
Our next question is from Dana Wakiji with DetroitRedWings.com.
Hi, Steve. Obviously, everybody's focused on the first round, especially tonight. But because you guys have so many picks, especially in the second and third round, aren't those almost equally as important in a way?
Yes, Dana, you need some of those picks to turn into players. If it's just going to be, we're going to, draft our first round pick, we're going to count on our first round pick playing every year, it's going to take forever to build a good team. We're going to need players to come in the second, the third round, later rounds from year to year. Not going to hit on every pick every year. Obviously, you're not going to hit on your first pick every year as much work as we do on it. So it's imperative that speeds the process up. You look at our team with, Tyler Bertuzzi, a second round pick, Philip Hronek, a second round pick, guys that are really having an impact. We'll definitely need those guys to turn into players. And that's why having more of the picks increases the odds of one of them becoming players.
And I know nothing is scheduled yet, but do you think it will be an opportunity at some point after the draft, whenever that is, to have a development camp or anything?
At this stage, Dana, we haven't planned for anything. We're just kind of taking a wait and see approach. Let's see if the league can get back, and it looks like, finish the playoffs, see what the off season is going to look like, see what other leagues are planning to do, and then maybe we could, plan something at that point. So right now we have no plans and for that, and doesn't seem today that it's feasible. But once we get more information, and if there's something that makes sense for us to do that's safe and practical and worthwhile, we would consider it. But we're not even close to that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Our next question will go back to Helene St. James at the Detroit Free Press. Helene, I think you might be muted.
Yeah, Steve,
Yes.
do you anticipate the player you're drafting at fourth is somebody who can come in and be on the team as soon as next season, whenever next season is? And also, in talking, it kind of sounded like, had you guys been able to play out this current season, Moritz Seider might have gotten a couple of games if Grand Rapids had secured a foothold. Do you see Seider as being somebody who could be on next year's team too? I mean, potentially both your 2020 first round pick and 2019 first round pick being on next season's team?
Well, Moritz had a real good year in Grand Rapids. I think he will get an opportunity whenever our season kicks off with training camp. He will get an opportunity to show he's ready to play. So I don't want to say we'll give him an opportunity. If he's ready to go, he'll play. And if not, he'll spend a little bit more time in the American Hockey League. But he had a very good year, and it's encouraging to see the things that he did in his development. So we'll wait and see when we get started and decide at that point. As far as who we pick in the first round, I would assume. How do I answer that? I guess it's possible.
Thank you.
Next question is from Ansar Khan with MLive. Hey, Ansar, I think you need to unmute your mic.
Sorry about that. Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm guessing, with the fourth pick, you're just going to take the best player available regardless of position. And last year, obviously, you took Seider on bolstering the defense. But is defense, just looking at the prospects throughout the system and young players on the team, is that a position that you want to focus on and increasing the depth there more so than at forward, where you seem to have a little bit more talent and depth?
I would answer at this point, we're going to take who we feel is the best prospect with the fourth pick. I don't think we'll target a particular position right now. We've got several prospects. We're hoping some of them sooner than later turn into NHL players. That I don't think we're at a position, and I think it's difficult with the NHL draft. These kids are so young. And the great majority of them are a few years away from playing to really draft specifically for a position. But I'd say safely at this time, we need depth. We need help at every position. So we'll pick who we feel is the best prospect.
All right, everyone. That is all the time we have for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Steve, for joining us. And stay safe, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us on a Friday night. We appreciate you tuning in.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Wouldn't want to be any place else.
That's a lie.
I don't know if you can still hear Art, but that was Steve Yzerman on the 2020 Draft Lottery. That live look-in was presented by Labatt Blue Light, refreshingly Canadian Pilsner. Visit your local retailer when safe to pick up some Labatt Blue Light. All right, let's bring back Art and Ken to talk about that Yzerman presser. Clearly, he isn't happy about the outcome, but I was really interested. It was cool to hear him say that they'll pick the best player at fourth, not any specific position. What was the most interesting thing that you guys heard about Steve's comments?
Well, first and foremost, before I mention that, I just had to laugh throughout the course of when Steve was talking, not at Steve, but at the fans who always used to, I'd hear it from the fans and they'd say, hey, you got to tank, you got to lose as many games as you can so that you can get the number one pick in the draft. Well, guess what? That doesn't always work. Yeah. So that just keep in mind. But what's interesting about, what Steve was talking about too, is that, I guess when you go into a position like he's in, if you get the number one pick, hey, that's great. That's gravy and everything else. But on the other hand, you have to, I guess, look at where else you may pick. And the possibility, worst case scenario, I guess, if there is one, is that you're going to pick fourth. So with that said, I think he was prepared, knowing that that could be a possibility, which it is right now. And I like the fact that he's going to take the best player available, whether it's a forward, a defenseman, a goalie, what have you. Whatever they decide is going to help the team the most at this particular stage in the rebuilding process, that's who they're going to take.
Well, I thought that. Well, I'll tell you what. I thought first of all, he said he wasn't surprised, and in all honesty, now that I've calmed down and had a glass of water here, I can say this: they had the best odds of picking fourth than they did winning the lottery. Their odds of picking fourth were the highest out of the top four slots. So, and that's exactly where it fell. So, I guess, if you can take solace in that, Steve was the number 4 pick. I know that. I thought what was really interesting is that Steve was known as a general manager for his picks in the second and third round. And I liked when he said, if you're in a rebuild and you're planning on building your team just of your number one picks, the rebuild is going to last forever. So I think he has something up his sleeve. I know I asked him that question, even though I know what Max asked him from The Athletic about, well, these guys are going to be playing in Europe and all that kind of stuff. I think that Steve would like to keep all these guys together. I think the NHL is eventually going to expand their roster somehow. Hopefully the AHL, it's really important that he's on that committee. But I thought, when he said, listen, we've got to get people in the second and third rounds. We have to get those kind of guys. And so I'm really eager to see that. I mean, I think that, Steve's draft list is probably 150 strong right now. Of any possible way that it could work out, because they do have an abundance of draft picks. Like, I don't know, like 6 or something in the top 100. I also thought what I really found interesting was the fact, as Ken said, and this is what's great about watching him, because he's not that far removed from when he was a player. He was always kind of coy and a little, kind of a give and take kind of thing. So I really like that about him. It's kind of a little bit of a game with him. And I didn't want to get into it too much because I would have started swearing, and I didn't want to do that in front of my colleagues. But it's still kind of calming down about the draft. But what I like about what he said is we're going to go for the best player available. And you know what? Who knows? Is that Askarov? Probably not, but it could very well be Jaime Drysdale. Again, the key to this draft, if you're a Red Wing fan, regardless of who gets the number one pick, that Lafreniere is going there. It's going to be LA. What does LA do at 2? If they go defense, Byfield or Stützle, one of those guys is a Red Wing. If not, then maybe it is Jaime Drysdale. Maybe it's Cole Perfetti, one of the high-end scoring forwards, Alexander Holtz, guys that, but I think LA's the key. I think LA's the key right now.
Okay, now you touched on this briefly. So even with the Wings getting the 4th pick in the first round, we still have the first pick in every other round. So what kind of advantage does this give the Red Wings?
Well, obviously, it's going to help them out quite a bit. And, anytime you can pick high in each of the rounds, as Steve said, your odds of getting a player down the road are going to help you out a little more. So, and to establish a player. So I just think that, they've got a whole slew of picks coming up this year in the draft, and the higher you can pick, the better off you're going to be. And, like Steve mentioned, the keys are trying to find the diamonds in the rough. And those are guys that you're going to pick in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round. And if they can come out and help your team, that only means that your team's going to improve quicker than what you thought.
Okay, and Art, does this open up the possibility of trading the first round pick in those rounds?
I was going to ask him that. I actually put my name up for another question after Ansar asked, and then I figured, you know what, I'm not going to say that because he's not going to tell me. That's a conversation. If we ever get back to Little Caesars Arena, when I see him in the elevator, I'll ask him. But I don't think it would have to be a deal. Like I said, he could trade that 4 pick, but he couldn't go down too far because it's heavy in draft forwards, and then take some of those 2nd round picks and pick those, and maybe try to go up. I mean, I don't know how it would work. I really don't know how it would work. But if he could get 2 first rounders, and one of those first rounders be Askarov and a high end quality player, I think he would. I think he would look at it. Look, where the Red Wings are at right now, and I think Steve's been pretty honest about this. It's open season. It's there's all bets are off. I mean, he's ready to take anything. Hey, want to make a deal? All right, talk to me. Let's see what we can do. But I think he's more than ready, though, and I think he has a pretty good idea, especially now that LA is in that 2nd spot, because they were the key. When you really looked at it and studied it, it seemed that all these other teams, they all were going to go forwards because it's a forward-heavy draft. LA is that one team, because of Drew Doughty getting long in the tooth. Love you, Drew. Sorry to say that, but that they need somebody. So I'm thinking that maybe Rob Lowe, a defenseman himself, a great player. Luc Robitaille. Maybe he and Steve, to be having a couple of conversations, reliving the glory days of 2002. and maybe they go defense. If they go defense, then this travesty that happened tonight is not that bad.
Love it. Okay, I think we have a fan question coming in from the social media. Here we go. It's interesting. You guys think we have shots at free agents? So that's a good question.
Well, certainly the Red Wings have some money now in their pockets because of expiring contracts. So obviously they're gonna shop around. But with that said, and I know Art, you and I talk about this quite a bit. Steve's not the kind of guy that's gonna give a lot of money, a boatload of money. I don't think at this point in the rebuilding process to a free agent out there that's looking for a long-term deal. We've noticed since he came to Detroit that the deals that he works with are usually 1 or 2 year deals. And it just seems to me that he's not going to go throw a boatload of money at a player that would want to come here to Detroit. That's not the way he wants to rebuild this team. It sounds to me like he wants to rebuild through the draft. And then once they get established and they're a playoff contender and perennial playoff team, then maybe they go out and spend a little more money and try to fill in a void or two. But it sounds to me like they just want to build through the draft. And I think that's the right way to do it right now.
Yeah, okay, now I agree with Ken. Oh, I'm sorry, Carly. I agree with Ken. Steve's only going to give out like 2 year deals at this point. The Red Wings aren't in contention right now. When he makes that big move, unless if Torrey Krug comes and says, "Hey, look, I want to come back to Detroit," maybe he gives him a deal. But I don't see that happening. I think that the guys that are free agents, you work your whole career to become an unrestricted free agent, you probably want to go to a team that has a chance to win the Stanley Cup. I know money is always a factor. I'm not that naive, but I think where the Red Wings are at, unless Torrey Krug is pining for the shores of Lake Erie or something, I don't think he's going to come back here. I think he's really happy in Boston. They have a really good team and they're close to winning a cup. So I would think that unless it's a goaltender, unless he might sign a goaltender to a longer term deal, but I think as far as a skater, a defenseman, or a forward, I think at this point it's a 1 or 2 year deal. Probably wants him on 1 year deals, but probably going to have to go 2 like he did last year. So it'll probably be 2 year deals. The guy I like on that list that I would love to see him get, and I sound like I'm LA King obsessed right now, although I think he got traded to Vancouver at the deadline, is Tyler Toffoli. I think Tyler Toffoli is a really good player, and I think he could mesh well in a Red Wing lineup.
Okay, now I have to ask this. This is kind of a silver lining question, you can say. So it takes over 20 guys to build a playoff team. Does that soften the blow that we dropped to 4th? Like, to know that it's not just going to be this one player that's going to turn this team around and put us in a playoff position for the next season.
Well, here's the thing, Carly. It's going to take time for any prospects. As Steve mentioned, it's hard to break into the National Hockey League at 18 just because the players are bigger, stronger, more talented, and they know the tricks of the trade. And you have to learn your skills by playing, and you do that and working on your skills by playing in the American Hockey League. The problem we're having right now is we don't know coming in if there's going to be an American Hockey League this season because of the COVID situation. So, players aren't going to be able to play if they can't make it on the Detroit Red Wings or in the National Hockey League unless they're playing out overseas, as one of the questions was brought up to Steve Yzerman earlier. So, I just think that it's a tough situation, I think, right now to begin with, because we don't know what the future is going to hold, at least short term. But again, to me, it just seems like it just takes most players, a majority of the players, 2-3 years of experience before they actually make it in the National Hockey League. That way they've got the experience. They play in all different types of situations: power play, penalty kill, regular shift, playoff games in the American League. And then once they earn their wings, they get onto the Detroit Red Wings or a team in the National Hockey League. That's just how it works right now. It's very rare that you'll get 1 or 2 or 3 players in the draft year that's going to make it right off the hop and get out of the draft and make it into the National Hockey League. It's really rare.
All right, Art, we have a social question for you. It's about Dylan Larkin, so let's see that here. Can Larkin take his game to another level as captain? Whew.
I think Ken can attest to this too. Knowing Dylan like we do, his motor always runs hot. He's kind of got the same intensity that Kris Draper always, approach the game. And offensively, he has a better skill set than Draper. No offense to Kris Draper, but I think yes, I think he can. I would say that anybody that's listening to this that is from Detroit and you're a hockey player and you have an opportunity to spend your whole hockey career first playing, in Waterford and all the, that rink that he loves that he goes to with the Dylan Larkin Hockey School. We've all been there, Lakeland Ice Arena. And, so you go from there, then you go to the development program in Ann Arbor, then you go to the University of Michigan, then you play for the Grand Rapids Griffins for, 7-8 games, and then you're a Detroit Red Wing. I mean, he's living the dream that, Ken and I dreamt about when we were, wee little lads. I mean, yeah, you're damn right. If I'm a native Detroiter and I get to wear the C on the Red Wings, I'm going to be the best player I can be. So, yeah, he hasn't reached it yet. He hasn't tapped out. Dylan with the C, I can't wait to see it.
I think he already plays top tier, but I think next year, especially with some draft guys coming in, we've got a lot of young guys on the team. It's going to come up a notch. And speaking of the next season, you can learn more about how to get access to Red Wings tickets for the 2020-2021 season, how weird to say, at DetroitRedWings.com. They're going on sale on Wednesday, and you have the opportunity to pick your dream seats. With that, Ken, I have a question for you. We'll start with you, and then we'll go to it's kind of a few questions in one. First off, what should Red Wings fans be excited about with this upcoming season? And with the Red Wings having the season they previously did, I guess I could say the last couple of seasons that they've had, how important is this draft, especially with the team being so unhappy with their play and having good young guys come in the organization? How hard are these guys gunning for their jobs?
Well, I'll say this. The team is going to look a little bit different, first and foremost, just because of the fact that there's been some contracts that have expired. And so you're looking at maybe, I would say, 8 to 10 possibly new players on this Red Wing team, whether they're from your minor league system or free agents. And the team's going to look a little bit different. What can the fans expect this season? Hey, I really want to see Anthony Mantha play a full season without injury. And I just thought that he was on a tear, a great start last year. And to me, he can score 40 goals in the National Hockey League, no doubt about it, but he's got to stay healthy. And, there was a time where he was shooting the lights out, scoring, lighting the lamp, and then all of a sudden he gets hurt, comes back, plays 4 or 5 games, gets hurt again. I just want to see him, Larkin, Bertuzzi, and Larkin and Bertuzzi for the most part were healthy this year. But on the other hand, I want to see the whole team stay away from injuries if that's possible. You're going to have injuries, but I want to see what this team is all about. It was hard to, I guess, describe last year's team just because of the fact that they led the league in man games lost to injury, and they really didn't have their full lineup in, maybe only a couple of times this season. So it's hard to evaluate, what this team is all about. And the other thing I think for fans, and we heard from Steve Yzerman, is perhaps maybe Mo Seider gets an opportunity to make the club. And if he does, I think he's going to add strength to the blue line. I like the development of Roenick back there on the blue line as well. Hopefully Danny DeKeyser's healthy and he'll come back. And the Red Wings can get a little bit solid on D. And maybe, Bernier looked pretty good there too. So we'll have to wait and see. But I just think that you're going to see a lot of new faces on this Red Wing team. And, hey, sometimes change is good.
All right, before you answer that question, I just have to say, fans, we will keep answering your social questions as you keep generating them. So keep sending them in, and we will answer them on the show. And then now, Art, I'm going to toss it to you. What should Red Wings fans be excited about for the next season?
Well, certainly, Anthony Mantha, Big Tony, the BT Express, as I affectionately refer to him as. I mean, he's a 40-goal scorer in this league year in and year out if he can stay healthy. He's a big man. He's powerful. When the Express gets going, you can't stop him. He has a wonderful shot. I'm really eager to see Philip Zadina. I think he has his confidence back. I think he's still, no offense to the Express, I think he definitely has the best shot on the team. I really want to see that. Of course, Larkin and Bertuzzi, those guys bring it every single night. Can Philip Hronek, keep building off a really good campaign that he had? I thought Gus Lindstrom is here to stay. Really eager to see Giovanni Smith. I think Michael Rasmussen's going to be on this team as net front presence. I'm really eager to see Michael, come back. Can Dennis Chalowski, who's great offensively, can he take that step and have a 200-foot game? Jarek McIsaac's going to be in Grand Rapids. I'm interested to see, and he's not even going to be in Detroit or Grand Rapids. Can Keith Petruzzelli build off a great junior year at Quinnipiac and have a great senior year? And maybe he's the Red Wing goalie of the future. I mean, they need one. Can Philip Larson rebound? Can he rebound from injuries and having a subpar first year as a pro? Who was a great netliner, and then netminder, and then Carter Gylander, who was the 7th overall pick, was some league in Vancouver. Granted, he's going to college now, but his numbers were phenomenal. So I mean, there's hope. If you've got to look, and now you bring Steve into the mix, and the draft that he had, where Elmer Soderblom was a 6th-round pick, and the guy was a stud. The guy was a stud in Sweden. So, he's got a really good eye for talent. Kris Draper, and the interesting thing that we don't say a lot about Kris Draper is that this draft class that Kris is in charge of the director of amateur scouting, this is the class that his son Keenan played. And Kris coached these kids, so he's known most of these players from the time they were 12 to now 18. They're now all eligible for the draft. And he's played against them all. They went to tournaments all over the world and all this kind of stuff. So Draper has a really good handle on this class specifically because his son was part of this class. So I think that's a really key factor. So I think there's a lot going on. I think that Steve, I'm really eager to see. Even though I think I've convinced him now, I was not that surprised that he drafted Mo Seider. Mo Seider was going up the charts. I mean, I've said this over and over. He was like 38th in September of 2018. By the draft hit in last year in Vancouver, in June of 2019, he was like 14th overall. That draft is a month later. He's in the top 10. So Seider was a good pick, a really astute pick. That's when I knew. Although I did follow Steve in Tampa a little bit as general manager, when he tapped Mo Seider, I remember being there and I just started laughing because all the people are going, whoa, what's Yzerman doing? What's Detroit doing? And I just started laughing. I said, damn it, Steve, again, there he goes. He knows what he's doing. And I was just happy about it. And then when you look at how this draft's played out and the players that they drafted, Temisto, excellent year. The defenseman of his league, and Johansson, who they just signed, or Johnson, Johansson, the Swedish kid. I mean, they all played really, really well. I mean, so I'm eager to see not only who they get at 4, but who they get in those second round. In the 3rd round, in the 4th round. I mean, from top to bottom. So there's a lot. Hey, look, the Red Wings didn't have a good year. They're going to admit that. They all know it. They're all upset about it. I think they're embarrassed about it. I think we all are to a certain degree. But Ken and I, we've been through the dead things era. We've seen this before. So there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel. So, but I think with Steve in charge, and Draper handling the draft, being very familiar with this class, and then Håkan Andersson over there in Europe working his magic as he always does. Who knows? I mean, that they could get better quickly. I think the biggest disappointment really is that if they would have gotten in the top 3, by all accounts, Lafreniere is 1, but then Stützle and Byfield were 2 and 3. And they were all considered to be high-end, really top-end prospects. Maybe not quite Byfield and Stützle as far as where Lafreniere might be, but who's to say in a couple of years that they're not in Lafreniere's class as they develop? Byfield's a really young kid. He's the youngest guy in the draft. So I guess what I'm saying is, but by going to 4, those 3 guys could all be gone. That's also a thing that. And nothing against Jaime Drysdale or whomever they end up picking. I'm not saying that, but those were okay. All right, they fall to 3 or they fall to 2. They don't get Lafreniere, but the consolation prize is pretty darn good. Well, now at 4, depending again on what LA does, those three guys could be off the board, then it gets interesting.
Right. I love when our kids going about the Detroit Red Wings. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Ken, I want you to answer this. Do you guys think draft lottery needs to be changed? Because we already know Art's answer.
Well, let's think back of why you have the draft in the first place. And the reason why is to help the teams that are in the lower part of the league get better. And by doing that is you give them the opportunity to draft the best players that are coming out. And eventually those teams turn it around and they become good teams again. And it's no different than when Pittsburgh was really bad and they were going to lose their franchise. And all of a sudden, they draft Mario Lemieux. And, they continue and they go when they had Crosby and Malkin and, the list goes on and on. That's how you get better in the National Hockey League. I don't like the fact that the rich can get richer. And, to me, the Red Wings did all they could, and this is from a Red Wings point of view, to continue to make the playoffs or try to make the playoffs, and they did for 25 straight seasons. And they didn't tank. They didn't do anything. But now that they're the worst team in the league, obviously they should have a higher pick, in my opinion. So would I like to see it change? Yes. I think that if you don't qualify for the playoffs, maybe you have a draft lottery for the teams that don't make it and just have it for those teams. Because to me, if you make it to the playoffs, and this year's a little bit of an odd year with the COVID situation, but if your bonus is to make the playoffs, that's one thing. But if you don't make the playoffs and you're sitting out while everybody else is playing, then your season starts with the draft and you deserve a top pick.
Okay. All right, now I have a question for you. We're going to go every other on these questions. We have a few more left. What are we going to do about our depth players? Start playing the prospects or keep the vets?
Well, I think that I think because of contracts, there's probably some veterans that you're not going to be able to shed their contract, or no one's going to trade them. Not that they've completely lost their talent or anything, but for the money that they're going to be paid and the term of their contract, I think they're here to stay. I think that it'll be creative to see what the Red Wings do. I think that I think the Red Wings would love to put the best lineup available. And if that's prospects, that's prospects. Don't sleep on Joe Veleno either. I mean, there's another guy that started to get it. He went to the World Juniors, won a gold medal with Team Canada, played with Alexis Lafreniere. I know that they were kind of talking about maybe renewing partnership here in Detroit. Not going to happen. But with that said, I think that I would think that a thinking man, a rational man, which I have not been tonight, and I apologize to both of you for that, that I would say that you, at this point, it can't get any worse than it was this year. Maybe baptism under fire, throw some of the young guys in, see where they're at. But they've got to earn their spot. I think that's been the one thing, and I know Ken can attest to this. You've got to earn your spot on the Red Wings. Nothing is going to be given or handed to you. Steve didn't say it in this press conference, but the press conference that he had, when I guess the league paused or whatever, when Steve finally talked again, he said, we're going to find out who wants to play now because these players are all on their own. We're all spread out all over the world. What are they going to do? Well, I think that, that's his watchful eye. He watches virtually every practice when he's in town. He was over in Europe probably more than any other NHL general manager last season, looking at players. So not only is he looking at talent, he's looking at desire, he's looking at heart. Many, many years ago, he told me that a lot of guys are really talented and a lot of guys want to be hockey players because it's a good living. But after 2 or 3 years, if you don't have that heart, you don't have that desire, you don't have that individual drive, guys are going to start passing you. So I think that, and I think that that's exactly what he's going to look at this camp. This is going to be a big year. Franz Nielsen, Justin Abdicator. These are proud men. These are hockey players. These are veteran players. They know they didn't have the greatest year. I know Justin's, disappointed a couple of years in a row. Well, they know that the young guys are knocking on the door. They know who Steve is. I mean, my God, he's a Hall of Fame player. someday maybe a Hall of Fame general manager if he can get in twice. You know, he could be in the players category and in the builders category or something. But I'm just saying, you know, I know I'm rambling here, but they're going to be a better team next year. How much better? I don't really know, but they're going to give everybody a chance and an opportunity. Mo Seider has an opportunity to be a Red Wing next year. Steve Yzerman is not giving him that opportunity. He's giving him the opportunity to make the team, but he's not going to give him the job. You have to earn your job. And I think there's a lot of Red Wings veterans included that are in that position.
Can I just say one quick thing, Charlie? I just want to say one quick thing. And I just thought about this when Steve Yzerman was talking about it. And somebody asked the question of whoever they select this year in the 4th spot, could that player possibly play on the team? And Steve kind of delayed his answer. And then he said, probably, or I forgot what the word he used. He's like, it's a possibility. Well, you know what that tells me? And I thought, well, geez, you know, we talked about this before. I'm thinking, well, you know, just for instance, Jaime Drysdale, let's say, all right, if the Red Wings are targeting him, and I'm using him as an example, but whoever they're targeting right now, I think they have an idea of who they want to select at number 4. And we're guessing, obviously. We don't know who they're going to pick. You know, we're limiting and trying to whittle it down. But they know who they're going to pick. So to me, that tells me that whoever they decide to pick at number 4, maybe they feel that that player has a good opportunity to come in with so many new players this year and play. So, you know, maybe they feel the person that they're watching is a guy that they really, truly believe if he has a good camp, he can come in, take a job, and run with it.
All right, Ken, we have one last question for you. Let's see what it is from social. What position would be priority to draft since we've got 4th?
Well, as Steve said, you're going to go for the best possible player at the 4th spot. But to me, I always thought that you build your team through goaltending and defense, and then you worry about the scoring, and that comes later. To me, I like a defenseman. I think that they've been drafting defensemen for a couple of years now, and it just takes time for the defenseman to learn the game and really be solid in the National Hockey League. And you can ask any defenseman, and they'll tell you that it might take 4, 5, 6 years. They'll play in the National Hockey League, but until they get the game down pat and learn the game and see it from the way they play on the blue line, it's going to take some time. That's why I think that if you can build a strong blue line core, and I look at when the Wings were winning, who did they have? Rafalski, Lidstrom, you know, Jamie McCown was back there, and you know, the list goes on and on. It's Brad Stewart. Larry Murphy came in, and he was a veteran, solid veteran player late in his career. If you have solid defensemen back there that can be with your team for a long, long time, you're gonna be good for a long, long time. So I think it starts back there on the blue line. And if there's a defenseman that's available, that maybe perhaps they continue to take a defenseman. Although they do need scoring, that's for sure.
There are a lot. We need depth in a lot of different positions on our team. All right, you guys, that's all we have for tonight. Once again, thank you so much to Labatt Blue. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Art. This has been incredible. Again, as we talk about next season, you can learn more about how to get access to Red Wings tickets for the 2020-2021 season at DetroitRedWings.com, going on sale Wednesday, with an opportunity to pick your dream seats, because you never know what's going to happen next year. And you don't know who we're going to draft. You know, it's a silver lining of it. It could be anyone. We don't know who we're getting at this point at 4th. Ken, Art, it's been such a pleasure. I love talking with you guys. You guys know I admire you, and I love listening to you talk Red Wings hockey. Thank you guys again for joining us. Fans, thanks for your questions. And make sure you join us on The Word on Woodward, presented by Raymond, as we continue to cover the NHL Draft and the Red Wings next Tuesday, starting at noon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.